said, never interrupt a flatterer. And you can never rest on any laurels that you might have accumulated. It's become clear to me from all the trolls who attack me relentlessly as a has-been. I confess to being a has-been, but as we all know, if you don't stay engaged, no one gets out of this alive. So I particularly wanted to say at the outset and to mention and pay my great regard for Corin Fairbairn Bass and to Annie Ashbolt, who have been great stalwarts of the ABC through their lives. Thanks so much for all you've done for the ABC in your various roles. I want to start first. How long do you want me to speak for, Janine?
2 hours.
20 minutes and then
20 minutes.
2 hours.
Okay.
30, we can give you another 10
I want to start with the macros before we get down to the ABC. And I'm sorry to have to use a profanity in the Rosehill Uniting Church hall, but if you just consider this is a quote: "Flooding the zone with shit was a disinformation tactic first used successfully by US Donald Trump advocate and Breitbart online influencer Steve Bannon, who coined the term flooding the zone with shit." What we're looking at, ladies and gentlemen, is a complete transformation of media and information and communications through what's called digital revolution. How many people here are subscribers to TikTok? One. How many on Facebook? Almost half. What about X? A few. No, more than a few, about 10. Got it. How many on Blue Sky, the new version of X, the cleaner version of X? The point that you're all so young, the point that I'm trying to make is that most young people nowadays, even notwithstanding the prohibition Albanese and Dutton in a bipartisan way have put on access to social media just before Christmas from young people below 18, 16 I think. Notwithstanding that, most young people nowadays don't watch TV or listen to radio. They can go onto Spotify for their music. Podcasting has become a phenomenon where you can listen. Broadcasting as we knew it, as we all grew up post-World War II, most of us are born post-World War II, most of us exchanged so that broadcasting has transformed itself into cybercasting, which is broadcasting on the internet. So I can go into Sky News on this thing, I can go into ABC News, I can see Albanese now in his press conference or Dutton's press conference broadcast live here on this phone, wherever I am. That is a transformative piece of technology, not only with, and it's many upsides, it's absolutely diverse material coming from all over the world. You can subscribe to anything in Western democracies that post their material, some with paywalls, a lot of free material. It's transformative in research, in science and education. What happens with artificial intelligence? We're all watching that because that is changing the nature of the creation of content. It will have many upsides, but it will also have many downsides, like flooding the zone with misinformation and disinformation. Now, as governments in proclaimed democracies grapple with whether and how to legislate the regulation of misinformation and disinformation to counter its malign influence on public trust, which is absolutely foundational to the effectiveness and functionality of a democracy, An understanding of what safely could be described as propaganda would be helpful, such as the precision the data mining of an individual's digital footprint has established, including all of those of you who subscribe to Facebook, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, and the others, as let alone your online shopping through Google and browsing and what have you, such as the precision of that data mining of your metadata and your browsing of platforms. It's empowered the digital platforms to scoop up billions in ad revenues, devastating the business models of radio, television and newspapers. And I just want to read you, I know this is the first prize of the raffle, just to give you an idea of the dynamism of this globally before we concentrate on our dear little country down here near the South Pole. Since 2000, this is quoting from Eric Beech's book, The Men Who Killed the News. It's about proprietorial influence now into the digital revolution. Since 2000, global newspaper revenue has fallen from 107 billion to around 30 billion, and it's still falling. Over the same period, global internet advertising revenue has grown from around 8 billion to more than 600 billion, and it's still growing. I take it that this is in Aussie dollars. In 1930, newspapers scooped up almost 80% of all US advertising revenue. By 2020, that figure was closer to 5%. Since 1990, employment at American newspapers has declined from 455,000 to below 90,000, devastating the business models of traditional media. And we'll get into public broadcasting shortly. In his book, Beecher said the inside story of how media moguls abused their power, manipulated the truth and distorted democracy. Beecher gave readers this perspective of the enormity of revenue and influence disruption. Amazon, owned by Jeff Bezos, who was just photographed recently with Trump and Musk. Amazon is the biggest player in this space, scooping up around 45 billion of ad revenue in 2023, more than the whole global newspaper industry combined. In retail media, ads are placed on retailers' e-commerce websites and targets consumers before the point of purchase in stores, all based on their online behaviour. Data mining, this is my analysis, data mining through algorithmic power has also become manifest in political influence within democracies. This is a political impact within democracies. Algorithms in the social media user context are computer coding specifically constructed to extract data through a user's keystroke engagement via likes, comments, posts and reposts retrieved by the algorithm to indicate what type of content the user prefers. It is therefore a more commercially and politically exploitable and most precise individual footprint. That's why in domestic politics in Australia, the major political parties and all the players are now having to have a social media presence to get young people in particular, rather than the wee oldies who still go to traditional sources. Now, there's been no analysis that I can see of systemic misinformation and disinformation. I know this because I've just done a chapter of a book that's soon to be published within Australian regulators, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the self-regulated Australian Press Council, the ABC hasn't been able to do it, SBS hasn't been able to do it, the industry groups haven't been able to do it, to work out the harmful effects. And as I said, the government is grappling with that and being countered by News Corporation, which is saying any attempt to regulate misinformation and disinformation would be the traducing of free speech. We can get into that if you want in question time. So you'll see on the ABC Alumni and ABC Friends website a platform that has been established to try to take the desperate need to sustain an Australian original content creator like the ABC and by implication SBS into the next phase. And it's quite disturbing what's happened with the defunding of the organisation. And the best way to illustrate what was a very successful commercial television, network television, with good 7, 9, 10, and the ABC, and all the radio stations, AM and FM, and its mix in Australia, which we're here with a vast island continent with 26 million people, mainly down the east coast, but spread over the vastness of Australia. Radio, as we know from the late 30s, was transformative at that time and bringing Australia together under both commercial players and the ABC. And with the global interlopers, what's called the SVODs, these video streamers. How many people are subscribers to Netflix here? About a third of the crowd. How many? What about Stan? A few. So you're all. It sounds to me that the bulk of people are still free-to-air TV watchers. And I'm sure you're going to shake your fist at me about the deficiencies of the ABC, which I'm happy to admit to. But I want to point out that the whole of the industries and the free-to-air broadcasting industry is in desperate trouble. During COVID, the pandemic, our mate Paul Fletcher, then the communications minister, why are you laughing, madam? Our mate Paul Fletcher took the content quota off the free-to-air TV. They were struggling, they're still struggling. That's why they argue with Albanese about holding those gambling games. They need the revenues. They're said within the industry insiders tell me that free-to-air TV is in terminal decline. Terminal decline, I'm not making that up. I took a note of it when I was told that. And they're desperate for revenue. So Fletch took the content quota off, and a director of alumni who follows these things very closely. And the outcome of this and other concessions given to try to keep Australia's free-to-air TV outfits on track. The outcome of this is reported in Screen Australia's recent drama report. That's one genre, drama. The combined free-to-airs made 9 hours of drama last year, just 9 hours of drama last year, and 0 hours of children's programming. That's what happens when you drop the regulations. They daren't bring it back, the quota, because, as I said, it might push the TV networks into more serious financial consequences. We're still waiting for the government to put a content quota on the video streamers like Netflix. They do spend money on making Australian content, but Sandra Levy says that the criteria is we'll make programs in Australia using Australian locations, as long as they have a transportable theme. It has to be kangaroos and crocodiles and sunshine and what have you that they can put into multiple markets. So the loss of Australia's stories is a big problem for the entire industry, anybody in content creation, and it becomes, in my view, another very compelling argument for maintenance of the investment, a taxpayer investment in the ABC. Children's programming is another one, and you'll see on the Friends platform that is right up there with documentaries, Australian documentaries relevant to Australia and our living, our experiences living and working in Australia. Very important. And the other element that's important to sustain the ABC's case in a very contested political atmosphere is emergency broadcasting. Through the floods and the fires and the droughts, that is the strongest argument, one of the strongest arguments we've got about the need for terrestrial broadcasters, still with the antennas, not necessarily through the Wi-Fi to get to your device. That's important. We've got to be on all platforms, but emergency broadcasting is high up there in justification for a taxpayer investment in the ABC. You'll see on it's freely available what's happened with punitive defunding of the ABC since Joe, our mate Joe Hockey. I know Joe. He dishonoured as treasurer Tony Abbott's promise that there'd be no cuts to the ABC or SBS as soon as they got into power. And I regret to say John Howard, who I thought would, like Bob Menzies, would be a supporter of a public broadcasting, such as the toxic influence of Rupert and now Lachlan Murdoch on the LNP, which I've had many discussions with Libs. We do have some friends in the Liberal Party and the National Party who say when you put the arguments to them privately, well, look, these are all the things that you can do, not just because you don't like a nasty question that Sarah Ferguson's asked you. If you get into government, you've got to expect to be asked some questions. You can't have it all your own way, like Rupert gives you all a free kick. You've got to expect to be held to account, otherwise we've got no democracy. The audience can get upset about David Spears interrupting the Prime Minister of Australia. How dare you interrupt the Prime Minister of Australia? But if your question is substantiated, you've got a basis for asking a reasonable question, including a confronting question from time to time, you buggers in the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, and the National Party, or the Greens or anybody else standing in front of the public ought to be able to have the capacity to answer it. And some really got spin doctors to help them change their messages and get round your nasty questions. That's part of the game, but you've got to expect to be held to account. And I find it very hard to get our Liberal friends to come out and say, so if you've got any Liberal friends, say, listen, this is what the ABC should be doing. You won't get it from the distorting Murdoch media because they're hyper-partisan. They hardly make any pretense of it now. And they get a mark like Fox News in the United States. They monetised fear and prejudice and what's called virality, which is also demonstrated in Beach's book. Virality means if I make a mild-mannered remark, which is might be reported or what have you, or a politician makes a mild-mannered remark, might be reported, but no one will take any notice of it in the digital revolution. In this atmosphere, if you make a provocative remark and an implied racist remark, or something that is offensive to somebody, it will go viral. And Sky in the US does that, and Sky in Australia does that. Fox in the US has made a pattern of it, and it's very successful. And it degrades intelligent, honest discourse, but you can get an audience like shock jockery. If you're a shock jock, I've always been in broadcasting agency. I've always known that if you make a prejudicial remark to appeal to an audience, you can get an audience. Alan Jones was an expert at this, right up to the Cronulla riots. You can make provocative remarks and you can go viral, and it's shock jockery media. The ABC is not into shock jockery. There may be some instances of it that have offended you from time to time, but that's not what the Act and the Charter and its obligations require. So, for politics. If you support the ABC, we have to do it within the context of now the digital revolution and why it's important for a country like Australia to sustain it. There's one advantage that we've got over our American friends, and that is it's compulsory voting. What's going to happen in the 2025 election? I don't know. Everything is up for grabs. There's been a redistribution. It's a battle for power in the House of Representatives, as you know. Albanese's got 77 seats, just across the line in 2022 to form a majority government. We can talk about the Senate later. The redistribution has changed the boundaries of about 24 House of Representatives seats, and so it'll be a battle. Anybody can read what happened in Werribee and Prahran in Victoria. If you go onto Anthony Green's blog site on the ABC, Anthony's been a wonderful cephalogist here at the ABC for 30 years. He's got a pendulum, and your guess is as good as mine about who's got a bloody win each seat. And you can say, oh, well, I think that's a good candidate, or that one's retiring, someone's retiring, what have you. You can make your own judgment of who's going to get to 76 seats. So at the moment, the election in 2025 will be all about cost of living. You can hear them talk about it all the time. People are struggling, and we've got a housing affordability crisis. The ABC may not get much of a mention in this context as the ABC's plight did in 2022 because Shorten and the ALP for the first time. The ALP has been no friends of the ABC, by the way. Keating and Hawke played up to Murdoch atrociously, and Keating helped, and Hawke helped Murdoch take over the Herald and Weekly Times in 1987, and they were waiting for their support. But Rupert is nothing if not disloyal, and dumped them quick smart after he got the. This is a history. It's certainly covered in Eric's book. It's been written, and many books have been written about the bloody thing, but it's covered in Eric's book most concisely. The point I'm trying to make is that the Labor Party hasn't been a friend of the ABC. To his credit, Swan, when he was the Treasurer, immediately, it was quite astounding, immediately after the global financial crisis, Swan gave the ABC the first money it had had since about 1986. Not much money, but increased the current operational funding. That allowed Mark Scott to start the transition of ABC content onto digital platforms, so that it had content that was ready-made and could be used on all the digital platforms. So the ABC now, with that money that we got from Swan, the first from the Labor Party, and you can see the graph in the annual report, the first from the Labor Party in government since about 1986, and the defunding that's gone on, that helped the transition. When Tony got in, of course, they dishonoured their promise. John Howard had promised not to cut the ABC in 96 coming into government, dishonoured the promise. Tony came in 2013, dishonoured the promise with Joe's first budget, and it has always distressed me why they can't hold to their promises. And this election, we're trying to get Peter Dutton, and because the polls look like there's going to be a substantial swing away from the incumbent government, because of cost of living, incumbency is a very moot point for a lot of electors. We're trying to get Peter Dutton to say exactly what his intentions are with the ABC. The Trump government, this is the Institute of Public Affairs, very happy to showcase the return of Donald Trump in the United States. Trump will do all he can to destroy PBS, what remains of PBS in the United States. It's always been defunded anyhow, and it goes up with a begging bowl to the public to try to sustain its revenues. Keir Starmer in the UK, I think, will continue with the funding model for the licence fee for the BBC. BBC generates its own income from its own export of its sometimes excellent programming, waiting to see the Mirror and the Light, the next episode of the Hilary Mantel work after Wolf Hall. Tremendous material that's done by the BBC. So we're waiting to see what Dutton will say. Just last year, Albanese and Michelle Rowland, at the insistence, at the advocacy of Kim Williams, who's the new chair of the ABC, he's the first chair who's ever actually gone and spent a lot of shoe leather speaking to all the colleagues, including from the National Party and the independents and the bureaucrats, to try to get the ABC's funding beyond. We've just won, as a result of people like you and the Friends, we've won 5-year certainty to take the ABC's funding out of the 3-year cycle. Government still has the right, of course, if there's a national deficit or what have you, in the expenditure review committee thing to go through the line items and defund organisations and close agencies and what have you. But we've got 5-year funding and we're not going to fall off a cliff in 2026. So we're asking Dutton, the independents and the current Labor government to secure the ABC's future with adequate funding. But more than that, we're not just whinging, which is a negative if you come across as a whinger all the time. We're not whinging about the defunding, although I am private. It's no good in a political campaign to be a whinger all the time. We're saying what the ABC would do if we had a reinvestment in its capacities. And they say, well, you know, you get $1 billion, the Murdoch press says you get $1 billion, what are you whinging about? Well, if you take off the transmission costs, that's substantially less than that. The Friends have on their platform, you'll see, have put an ask, a quantum they want, and this is informed by the work that's been done on the analysis of the funding and what we could do with a reinvestment. The Friends have put an ask of 140 million recurrent a year and guarantees that it'll be inflation proof and that it will have elements of indexation and it will have elements of covering increasing production costs so that the ABC across the genres can get back in the game. The only way the ABC can survive in this through this digital revolution is to be able to produce original content. So emergency services, children's, drama, documentary, education, entertainment services, and leave to one side. But it's important, absolutely vital, news and current affairs. News and current affairs always is the aggravation as far as the politicians are concerned. And when you appeal to their national interest rather than their political interest, which is very hard to do to a politician on the make, that becomes the key element. So if you know Peter Dutton and David Littleproud and Barnaby, if you could appeal to them to think. So we've got to talk their language because they could be in a position to secure the destruction of the ABC. I'll just finish on this. Who's going to win the election? I don't know. As I said, you can have your own guess. There are a number of scenarios. One is Albanese is returned with an increased majority. He's working hard on that. I can tell you now, he's hoping that Michelle Bullock from the RBA next week starts to cut interest rates, not only in February but also in April. There's the WA election, I think it's on the 8th of March, if that's a Saturday. On the 8th of March, Albo may well wait until after that before announcing. So it could be, Phil Curry from the Fin Review reckons it might be about April 12th, okay, or maybe into May. I think there's still, Chalmers is still booked to do a budget in March, and he'll be, won't be calling it pork barrelling, but it will be addressing, I would say, the cost of living crisis. Albanese might get a political lift if interest rates start coming down. It's interesting to note that Dutton doesn't want the RBA to lower interest rates, nor does the Commonwealth Bank. Anyway, I'm too cynical of political report, and I apologise. So Albanese can win. Albanese's return with his current majority, but more likely it seems that with the cost of living crisis and a lot of people not following media, going on their emotion. Many of us vote on emotion, not rationality. That's why I've always been a swinging voter, as they say, because I know expedient the political parties, and I think everybody does, how expedient the political parties can be, the mainstream political parties. On current polling, the LNP coalition would be expected to increase its current notional, this is following the AEC redistribution, holdings of 58 seats to somewhere, I'll just put this to you speculatively, to somewhere in the mid-60s, but still well below the 76 seat threshold, unless there's the mood of the nation is for a landslide and a change of government, that we're going to take a baseball bat to, I know it's an Americanism, a baseball bat, take a baseball bat to Albanese and kick him out after one term. The issue then becomes how many seats Labor will lose and which independents and or minor parties will it need to form a minority government at an election now expected to be called, as I said, in April or May. Currently, there are 18 independents and Green MPs in the House of Reps. Here's an indicator of their margins for your assessment of their election or loss. Kate Cheney, Curtin, and Anthony Green on the website, on his website, has, as a result of complaints, has stopped the two-party pendulum and looked at on primary votes, on two-party preferred voting, and looked at Kate Cheney versus Libs, for example, and you can see there he's gone into the individual so-called teal seats. Kate Cheney's got a margin of 1.3% versus the Libs, and she's working hard to hold on. Kate Cheney's a very strong supporter of the ANC. Those teals that got up in 2022 are all strong supporters of the ANC, and we've used that to try to get the Libs to change their attitude to the ABC without success, because, as I said, in my view, they're captured by Rupert and the LNP. Monique Ryan, Kooyong, 2.9% versus the Libs. Sophie Scamps, McKellar, 2.5% margin over versus the Libs. Allegra Spender, Wentworth, 4.2% versus the Libs. The Gaza war Israel war might impact on Allegra Spender's vote. You have to make an assessment about that. Zali Stegel and Warringah, 11% versus the Libs. So you'd think on those figures that Stegel would survive. Zoe Daniel, Goldstein, 2.9% versus the Libs. Kylie Tink from North Sydney, well, that seat's been abolished, and Kylie, I notice, is not standing. Traditional independents, as they're called. Helen Haynes, independent. Helen Haynes is astounding in holding that seat of Indi, 1.4% versus the Libs, so that's marginal. Andrew Wilkie, Clark, he's been there for a long time, Andrew, 20.8% versus the ALP. The people of Clark love Andrew Wilkie. He's a wonderful attribute to what's called the independence movement in Australia. And we've had independence since Federation, and some of them, many of them, have been very good and maintain the integrity with their communities right through their dealings with government. Di Lee Fowler, remember the Labor Party shoehorn Christina Keneally to Fowler? 1.6% versus the ALP. The ALP's endorsed a Vietnamese candidate and to take the battle up to Di Lee. Rebecca Sharkey Mayo, 12.3% versus the Libs. You've got Bob Catter, you've got Andrew G, Russell Broadbent, Adam Bant, how Bant goes in Melbourne with the swing apparent against the Greens. Max Chamberlain took Rudd's seat at Griffith, remember? He's 10.5% versus the LNP, but the Labor Party will be trying very hard to knock Chandler Mather off. Elizabeth Watson-Brown Ryan, 2.6 versus the LNP, and Stephen Bates, Brisbane, 3.7 versus LNP. So you can read all that if you want to embroil yourself in the debate about. The reason I'm saying that is that if there is a minority government, either whoever gets the more seats, say it's Albanese, or Dutton, whoever gets more seats would be in a better leverage position to get the crossbench support on confidence. It's happened before in Australian politics. It may happen again. Everybody in Canberra now acknowledges it's not the duopoly anymore, there's another movement. That's why Don Farrell's legislation to try to uncap the public funding for the main parties and cap the funding and donations for the independents is seen as being so vicious against the independent movement. The duopoly can come together in wonderful bipartisanship when you're trying to knock off the gravy train. So, sorry again to be so cynical, but so they're the dynamics that we face. The ABC has a strong case, and it's justified on all the data that has been prepared. The ABC friends and alumni will be trying to produce videos. If only we had 14 million like Advance Australia and the IPA funded and bankrolled by Gina. We're like you, we're a voluntary organisation, and you work on the commitment and the passion of your community to try to get the message over. So we'll be trying on social media to try to get a message out, but don't forget the ABC. I don't think, unless Albanese makes it an issue in his debates with Dutton, what is your intention with the ABC? And Dutton does a Trump and says, I'll close it down, I'll sell it, I'll put in the subscription model, I'll put in a paywall. These are green left wokes, I've got that from Chris Kenny all the time on Sky News. Unless he goes into great hostility, it won't become an issue. I'm expecting that Dutton will be smart enough to say the ABC, I give a commitment that funding of the ABC will continue. But as soon as he says that, I'll say, well, that's what John said, that's what Tony said, and I'll be saying, Dutz, sorry, we can't trust you given that pattern. That's why I'm very distressed at the Liberal Party for such its hostility for an organisation like the ABC, which was supported by Bob Menzies. Not the Labor Party so much. The Labor Party was a benign supporter, and sometimes hostile, as I said, with Keating and Hawke. The Labor Party didn't like the exposure of the Eddie Obeid, which destroyed their standing in New South Wales, for example, where I was involved from 2011. It absolutely destroyed Labor Party support base in Western Sydney. They never cut you any well, thanks for covering that, from which the Libs benefited. You point that out, well, that's neither here nor there. So that's the dynamic we face, and it's a hard thing. Formidable forces are out to destroy a good, solid, democratic media institution called the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. If Dutton gets in, we'll see what he does. It could be full-on hostility, in which case we'd have to bunker down. The future of the ABC would therefore rely on the composition of the Senate, and I'll finish on this, the composition of the Senate. If the LNP doesn't have the numbers in the Senate, then the ABC will limp on for another 3 years. But it's a real test of the commitment of our fellow Australians to this foundational element of democracy and media in our country. So I've been talking for longer. Questions? Yes.
Oh,